That was wonderful. Sexy Kevin. I have to compete with Sexy Kevin. All right, so every year for a number of years, my family and I, and one of my sisters and I and our kids, we all packed up and went to this performing arts summer camp. And when we started going, or I started going, I knew we were going in the car on the way up there. I would always make myself a promise that I would do something at this performing arts camp that would involve my making a fool of myself in front of a large group of people. And so I appreciate your sticking around here because we haven't been to the camp for a couple of years and I haven't had any public humiliation, so thank you for being here. This is my first time ever doing any kind of stand-up-y storytelling kind of thing, so you'll just have to bear with me. When I was talking to Beth about this, about what I said, what am I supposed to talk about? She said, well, you're supposed to be the fatherhood expert. Why don't you talk about your kids? So I want to start off with a story, short story. It's not funny, but there are other things that are lighter later, so just you can groan in the appropriate places. So this is really a story to give you a sense of how I ended up focusing on fatherhood and looking at that and turning that into a career eventually that now spans 10 books on fatherhood, and I didn't intend to write anything. I specifically, when I was looking for master's programs, deliberately eliminated anything that had a written thesis. And my punishment, of course, now is that I have to write a book a year for the rest of my life. So the story starts off with my oldest child, who's in her 20s now. And we're in this park in Berkeley, and she's just maybe 6 or 7 months old, this angelic little kid. I'm pushing her in a swing. She's having a marvelous time. And just pushing, and she's yelling, "Daddy, Daddy," and it's wonderful. And I don't look too much more like a serial killer now than I did then. And there's a little girl comes up walking behind me, and she starts walking up a ladder that's about 3 feet away from this swing that I'm pushing. She's walking up, and I'm watching her, and I think, my little kid's going to be that old, she'll be able to climb up to the top of the ladder too. She gets up to the top of the ladder, and she's about to try to get herself to go down the front of the ladder, but she lets go, and she starts falling backwards down the ladder. So I do what any normal person would do, and I grab this kid grab her out of the air with one hand, because I hold the mic with the other one, and put her down, and this woman comes up out of nowhere, swoops this kid up and gives me this really withering look, and she says to the kid, "Did he hurt you?" And I thought, fuck you. What do you mean, did he hurt you? I mean, Jesus. Which I didn't say, of course, because that just wouldn't be a polite thing to say to somebody in a park. But I thought, I responded to this by thinking the way that I always think is like, what the fuck was that about? And I wonder what she was thinking. And so I did what I do, and I went to the library at UC Berkeley and started looking up research on fathers and what is it about fathers? And I found some interesting stuff that ended up becoming part of the books that I've written. And one of the main things that I found out was that when fathers are involved in their kids' lives, the kids do better in every conceivable area, physically, emotionally, socially, every possible area. And so I decided my revenge on that bitch in the park is to be the best dad I could possibly be and to raise an amazing daughter. And so that's what I set out to do. So I was all in on the dad thing. I became a stay-at-home dad. And I took my kids to, well, she was only one of them at the time, but I took her to museums and the parks, and we did all sorts of stuff, and I read to her constantly, and we were having a marvelous time, and I developed this hold, a special way of holding her that was incredibly good at getting her to go to sleep and to stop crying. It was kind of a chokehold sort of a thing. But not really at all. And then I got so good, I changed so many diapers, I thought I could do it with my eyes closed, which I actually tried once, and I can't recommend it as a way of doing things. But you could do it in low light, it's possible. And so, but I started getting a little cocky with all of this stuff, with all of these diaper changes and everything, and it began to change one night, because these things always happen at night. So I'm alone with her, she gets up in the middle of the night, she almost never got up in the middle of the night. I start going into her room, I pick her up, and I carry her around, and I start telling her a story, and I put the magic hold on her, and she just is crying and screaming and crying, and it's just terrible, it won't go anywhere, and I'm trying everything I could possibly do, and I'm starting to think, look, I'm good at this stuff. People tell me that I'm good at this stuff, and I'm the guy who would throw himself in front of a steamroller to save his kid. And then I keep going, and she won't stop crying, and then all of a sudden I have this thought goes through my mind, I think, I would throw this kid in front of a steamroller if she'll just shut the fuck up for a few seconds. Which is immediately followed by, oh my God, I'm the world's worst father. I realized later, after doing a bunch of research on this, that everybody has thoughts like that. And that anybody who tells you, if you ever meet somebody who tells you that they have not thought about choking their kid or throwing them out a window, there's only two possibilities. They either are lying to you or they don't have children. That's the only thing. So I realized as all this stuff is going on, I've changed my daughter's life presumably, but fatherhood has begun to change me as well in a lot of interesting ways. And I would walk down the street and I'd start looking at minivans and kind of fondly and thinking it might be nice to have one. What the hell is the matter with that? Or I'd be driving down the road and I would see a yellow light and I would slow down and stop instead of flooring it to get through the whole thing and think, where was I going in such a big hurry before? But just think things start changing like that. And one of the biggest things that was changing to me was messes. And I am by no means a neat freak, but I would end up doing things that I never thought I would possibly do. And remember, any of you who have kids, and for those of you who don't have kids, this will be a warning to you that maybe you should use condoms. But with little kids, they're so pitiful when they get a cold, and you always have these little blue bulby things to suction out their noses. It doesn't work. But what I figured out worked well, and I know that some of you have done it, and the lights are in my face. I can't see if you're going to be lying to me about this or not, but if you plug up one nostril, you can suck the snot out of the other nostril. It's so much more humane, and it gets the stuff out of there so much faster. It's just much better. And then you get your kid ready to go, and all dressed up in a nice little outfit, and into the bag, and the backpack is all packed, and you're ready to go, and moving everybody outside, and all of a sudden you hear, and there's one of these blowouts, these diaper blowouts, and it's up the back and into the hair, and then the response from the father is, oh, that's so cute. And you think, God, if some adult walked into the house and shit all over everything, would I say that's cute? Somehow I don't think so. But the thing that started really to get me when I realized that I was kind of over the end here was having to do with food. And you put a little food in their mouth and they chew it and then they spit it out. And so I would just come along and do this, and lick it up. And they chew a little bit more food, and it goes down the shirt. You just go like that and lick it, and it gets onto the pants, and it's everywhere. And this little daughter, who was an only child still at the time, can't imagine how I ever had more kids than that. But so she loved canned pumpkin. And that was her thing. She just absolutely loved canned pumpkin. I was sitting with her, and we're eating pumpkin, and she's going to town on this stuff, and a lot of it is getting down her throat. But a lot of it is getting all over her. And I'm just eating probably as much of it as she is, because I'm in there picking it up off of everything. And it's, when I finish my meal and she's finished with her meal, I decide we have to go somewhere, so I'm gonna have to get her dressed. So I take her over to the changing table, get her undressed, and get ready to put on a new outfit. And as I'm putting on this new outfit, I realize, I missed a glob of pumpkin here on the inside of her thigh. And so I get down there. And you realize, and he's got it figured out, realize this is what fatherhood has become, is I am literally eating my child's shit. This is to the extent you get to be this kind of, Mr. Dad involved kind of a dad. It's a pretty tragic thing. And I'm realizing, so my personality is changing, and their personality is fairly fixed. And that little kid, for example, she loved price tags and packages. You could give her a present and she'd tear it, throw the present away, and she'd save the box and the price tag and everything like this. And it stayed kind of consistent. Her little sister, who showed up a few years later, was from day one a manipulator. And sitting here, these stories for some reason always end up around food. She loved blueberries. And I'm with her and she's eating blueberries, and we're going through this big package of blueberries. And at one point I say to her, no, we're done here. And this is a kid, you have to imagine she's about 9 months old, an incredibly early talker, and a very articulate early talker. So I'm feeding her blueberries, and I say, we're done with the blueberries. Let's go, we gotta go. She says, I want more blueberries. I said, no, we're done. I said, I want more blueberries. I said, no. Why? So the 9-month-old has to know why. I said, well, because I've told you the story about your sister with the pumpkin poop, and I'm the one who changes the diapers, and I'm not going to go through the pumpkin thing with the blueberries again. It's just not going to happen. And she says, I want more blueberries. I said, no, we're done. And then she does one of these things, she leans forward, and she says, I want more blueberries, or I'll cry. Jesus, you look around for what's it called, that show? Candid Camera kind of a thing. It's like, oh my goodness, somebody's a ventriloquist putting words in my child's mouth. And she figured out how to embarrass me at the same time. I took her, there's that same day, actually, I remember this so well, took her to a movie. And she was at that point, this is a couple of years later, took her to a movie. She's almost 3 years old. So we go to the line, I'm buying my ticket, and it's free for kids under 2. So the guy asked me, how old is the child? And I said, she's 2. And she, of course, pops up and says, I'm not 2, I'm 27 months. Pay for the damn ticket, and we go in there. And so, of course, it's the middle of the day, packed movie theater, and I feel as she's falling asleep on my chest that her body is just getting heavier, and I realize she's going to need to have a diaper changed here. And of course, I can change diapers in the dark, remember. So I start sliding her pants off so that I'll be able to change the diaper. And at this moment, of course, she pops up her head and she says, get your hand out of my pants! Jesus. Unbelievable. So a couple of years later, after this, the big sister, the pumpkin poop girl, she had a thing with also wanting to get back to her moment. So I'm at home, she comes into my room and she says, I want to take a shower. I said, well, wonderful, take a shower. I said, I want to wash my hair. Great, wash your hair. He said, there's no shampoo. I said, of course there's shampoo. I just put a big thing of shampoo in there. She said, no, that's Costco shampoo. Don't you have anything that's more expensive than that? Look, the bottle is continuing. And as fatherhood goes on, and I think it's the same thing with motherhood, but for dads and for me in particular, I always expressed my love to my kids by doing things for them. It was just a very important way to do it. And I got feelings of love back from them by feeling appreciated and understood. And I had a thing with this daughter right here, the youngest one of all, who's sitting in the front row, chronically on this for God knows what. But I'm apparently, you wouldn't know this, but I'm apparently a social media influencer in the dance space. So I got approached by some company to try on some of their clothes. So I get the clothes, I put them on, and I want to have this daughter who's a photographer take pictures of me. So I go knock on her door and knock at the door, and she opens the door up and she looks up for her phone for a second. And she says, oh, you look, and she's a very articulate child, you look, you look decent. I thought, well, decent, that's pretty high praise, which was followed immediately by, oh, can I borrow that shirt? Which I thought, oh my God, I'm a cool dad. My 15-year-old daughter wants to borrow my clothes. And then I remember the one that was my favorite one of all, which was back to the pumpkin poop girl. When she was in high school, and she was writing a paper. She was writing a paper on gay marriage, and this is before gay marriage became a thing. And she was really struggling with it, and so she comes up to me, she says, you're a writer, you should help me with this paper. Okay, I'll do the paper, so we knocked around some ideas. And I said, one thing with this paper you might want to take a look at is The Merchant of Venice. There's a speech in there by Shylock, and he talks about half not a Jew eyes, and this whole big long speech about how Jews, they have the same feelings and they bleed, and you feel insulted, and the whole thing. It's a wonderful speech. And I said, you might find some parallels between that and between gay marriage. And she goes, go! In the way that teenage girls can do, and she storms off and slams the door. And I thought, well, okay, that's the end of that one. I guess I'm no longer useful. And a couple hours later, she comes out and she marches into my room and she stands like this and she says, I read your goddamn Shakespeare thing, and you're not as stupid as I thought you were. And I thought, that is as good as it gets. Thank you very much. Thank you.